Good evening, everyone. There was a technical glitch. So actually, we need to change the joining link. Hopefully, my voice is audible. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, you are.
Okay, fine. So today's topic is non-neoplastic pulmonary pathology, and the speaker is Dr. Tripti Kaur. Okay, just wait a minute. Dr. Tripti, can you make it a presentation mode or full screen mode?
Yes. So we will try to make this meeting a little interactive. I will be asking some questions in between, and it would be good if people would could unmute themselves or could put their answers in the group chat itself. So we all will be reading your answers, and then we can actually make it an interactive session so that it is interesting and not a boring thing for all of us. So, before we go on to the lung pathology cases, we need to know what kind of biopsies you receive in the lung. So, these could be,
Sorry
linear.
to interrupt, Dr. Tripti. It's still not in presentation mode. We are seeing.
Just a sec.
Yeah, sure.
This meeting is being Share. Now, is it okay?
Not yet.
Not in the slideshow mode, Dr. Tripti.
Now,
Actually, your screen is locked to the second slide. It is not moving.
okay, stop share. I'll share again.
Ma'am, while sharing, you make sure that you press the entire screen and not the slide bar, ma'am.
Is this fine? Okay.
No.
Again, I'll stop share. Entire screen. Share. Now,
Yes, it is. Okay.
okay. It's moving.
Yeah, it's moving. Just please hide that dialogue that's coming. That
Yes,
stop sharing
okay.
and hide. Thank you. We are good to go.
Okay. Yes. So let's start. So first we get these core needle biopsies, which is generally for a peripheral lung nodule. Then we get these endobronchial biopsies, which generally the pulmonologist would have seen something in the bronchus during the bronchoscopy, and they would have just sampled it out, like some granularity or some nodules. Then third is this wedge lung biopsy or surgical biopsy or VATS guided biopsy, in which you receive massive amounts of lung tissue. It's like an entire lobectomy kind of specimen. And the fourth is a TBP or a cryobiopsy. So TBP is usually smaller than a cryobiopsy. TBP, we get lesser number of alveolar spaces as compared to a cryobiopsy. These days, the clinicians are preferring doing cryobiopsy for an interstitial lung disease and not a TBP. But having said that, the wedge lung biopsy or the VATS guided biopsy remains the gold standard for an interstitial lung disease. Before we
Sorry to
proceed,
interrupt, Dr. Trupti. What is exactly cryobiopsy? TBB is there's transbronchial biopsy.
so the technique is the same. They go in via the transbronchial route, but they use some cryo techniques in which there is immediate freezing of the tissue through which they can scoop out more amount of lung tissue.
Thank you.
So before we go on to the lung diseases, we should know how a normal lung parenchyma looks. This is how a normal lung parenchyma looks. You see these alveolar spaces, and there are these septae which are actually separating the various lobules. And you can see these pulmonary arteries here. These pulmonary arteries are most of the time related to a respiratory bronchiole. This blue line you can see here is the respiratory bronchiole. So on a closer look, you can see these respiratory bronchioles are always accompanied by a pulmonary artery branch. Okay, this is the respiratory bronchiole. And if you look at these alveolar spaces are lined by these flat type 1 pneumocytes and a very few of these outpouched cells, which are the type 2 pneumocytes. These type 2 pneumocytes are very, very important because they form a part of the reparative process. Anything happens to the lung, these type 2 pneumocytes are the first ones to come and replace the entire lining of the alveoli. So I remember it like type 1 pneumocyte is the pneumocyte in Shavasana and type 2 pneumocyte is the pneumocyte in Tadasana. You can remember it with whatever hints you want, but this is how it is. So, like all other non-neoplastic pathologies in the lung, also we have a pattern-based approach. We see whether it's an acute lung injury or a chronic lung injury. Chronic lung injury, we basically make out because of the fibrosis pattern. Now, if it's an interstitial infiltrate, what kind of interstitial infiltrate it is? Is it a lymphocyte, eosinophil, or something else? What are the type of alveolar filling cells? Are these macrophages? Are these some infectious organisms? Or are these some proteinaceous material which could suggest PAP? Then comes the nodules and the cysts, which will actually mimic your malignancies. And next is a near normal biopsy. So this is the compiled list of all the previous year's questions. You can take a screenshot of this list. Most of them are likely to be asked as short cases, but you should always remember that some certain pathologies might also come as dual pathology in long answer questions and frozen sections. So you should be aware of all these entities. So coming to acute lung injury, the prototype is diffuse alveolar damage, which is actually characterized by these. One second, where is my point? Okay, so there are these okay, so there are these hyaline membranes which are lining these alveolar spaces. This is the acute phase of diffuse alveolar damage. And when it becomes a little chronic, it is possible that you might not be able to find these hyaline membranes, very evidently. They may be hiding somewhere. Like in this area, you can see portion of a hyaline membrane. And another thing is in acute lung injury, always you will see a mixed inflammatory reaction. Lymphocytes, neutrophils, some eosinophils. However, in organizing kind of damage, you will see this interstitium being a little edematous. They're trying to form these fibroblastic plugs, but not yet formed. So there are there is a list of etiologies like infections, sepsis, shock trauma, aspiration, radiations, drugs and toxins, which can cause acute lung injury, or for that matter, DAD. DAD is the term for diffuse alveolar damage, and it actually leads to adult respiratory distress syndrome, which is ARDS. So patient will present with cough, dyspnea, difficulty to breathe, and most of these patients would, the generally the damage is so significant that they are put on mechanical ventilations or already they are on ventilators. So, based on what kind of cell you are seeing in an acute lung injury, you can actually come to certain etiologies. Like, for example, if you see eosinophils, more number of eosinophils, for example, if you see in a bowel fluid, you can put it in the comment that we need to rule out etiologies like smoking, drug, systemic disease, Church-Strauss syndrome, or allergic rhinitis for that matter, because these allergic rhinitis cases are the cases which are prone to hypersensitivity kind of reaction. So, any bowel fluid with good number of eosinophils or a biopsy with good number of eosinophils, you need to mention all these etiologies in your comment section so that the examiner knows, yes, this person is aware of the various etiologies she has to rule out. So let's go to this case. This case I've taken from Leeds site. You can go and check it out. So this is the low power view. The lung looks quite busy. You can see the respiratory the bronchioles, the vessels. Only these are kind of seen from the low power. The alveolar parenchyma is completely gone. On a closer look, you can see these fibrinoid kind of exudate within the alveolar spaces and good number of eosinophils with eosinophilic microabscesses. Then these are the peripheral alveolar spaces showing a lot of edema within the spaces. And in other areas, you can see that there are these fibroblastic plugs. These fibroblastic plugs are very pale looking because they are very mucopolysaccharide rich. So these are basically at places dumbbell shaped. Can you make out? And in the previous slide, you could make out that they have a characteristic branching pattern also. In few areas, you can make out that these are these are actually invaginating into the alveolar spaces and kind of occluding them. So, what is the diagnosis? What would you like to rule out when you're looking at the slide, and which negative finding is important? Anybody would like to answer this question, please?
Please unmute yourself and respond. There are two responses in the chat box. Organizing pneumonia, another is called as BOOP, another called it as hypersensitivity.
Yes. So organizing pneumonia is correct, but it's with a lot of eosinophils. So what other differentials do you have?
We'll have to rule out an LCH.
Yes, very good. So LCH you have to rule out. You have to look for those grooved histiocytes, atypical histiocytes. Anything else? Eosinophils.
The parasitic infestation.
Yes, very good. Parasitic infestations.
Vasculitis.
Sorry,
Hypersensitivity pneumonitis.
yes, vasculitis is the correct answer. Hypersensitivity pneumonitis, yes, you can get these eosinophils, but not so exuberant usually. But yes, you can have. But that is a lower down differential. And the fourth is the drug. Drugs are very, very important because some patients will have a hypersensitivity reaction to these drugs, and then they will present with this kind of picture. So what else you would like to look at this slide is absolutely right, you people were vasculitis, parasites, Langerhans cell histiocytosis. Now, the clinician says that she is not thinking of vasculitis. There is no asthma, so Church-Strauss is out. Any leading questions you need to ask? Yes, we need to ask: Is has the patient been put on any new drug? What are the peripheral? What is the peripheral blood picture? What is the absolute eosinophil count? What are the IgE levels? And you yourself have to go and look bowel fluid. Bowel fluid is in your hands. It would have come to your department. Always and always in a lung case, please don't forget to correlate in your mind with the bowel fluid. So these are the causes of organizing eosinophilic pneumonia, just to reiterate. And the differentials, as you people rightly said: Langerhans cell histiocytosis, hypersensitivity pneumonitis, Church-Strauss. And a very important point here is that some cases of pneumothorax also cause eosinophilic pleuritis. And this eosinophils from the pleuritis can extend into the subpleural alveolar parenchyma and give you that look. So if it's a subpleural biopsy and the patient has pneumothorax, this differential also comes into picture. So next case is a 20-year-old male, a young male, okay, anemia and hemoptysis. So you see this low power, the parenchyma seems to be maintained, and there are a lot of pigment-laden macrophages in the alveolar spaces.
Desquamated interstitial pneumonia.
Okay. Do you want to have a closer look at these macrophages? The pigment is actually brown. It's not looking anthracotic to me.
Any hemorrhage that will have to rule out, ma'am, because there could be a hemocyte-laden macrophages. So
Yes,
DAD.
yes. Very good, very good. That is the first thing.
Good pastures.
Any other?
Good pasture syndrome.
Good pastures.
Good. Yes, yes, yes. Very good. So vasculitis is the first. Then second is good pastures. Very good. Third, you
Uh,
can.
no, no,
So if there is
broadly,
a hemorrhage, what are the causes of hemorrhage in the lung? So a resolving hemorrhage can always have this kind of look.
Heart failure.
heart failure.
Heart failure, yes, very good. And causes of hemorrhage: lung thromboemboli, lung infarction, adjacent areas near the lung infarction, a case of granulomatous polyangiitis, or any case of vasculitis for that matter. The adjacent areas can show this kind of picture. Okay, so what would you like to ask? So first diagnosis was vasculitis. So what would you like to ask the doctor? What would you write in your comment section? I would like to know what.
Anchor.
Serology, Priyanka,
Yes,
or
Anchor serology.
yes, very
serology.
good, very good. And if you
Then
have
HR.
Any
if you
skin
have
or
a spare tissue, if you have a spare tissue in like a spare frozen tissue with you, would you like to
We
do
can do
something with it?
immunofluorescence.
Immunofluorescence. Yes, very good. So all these comments, whatever you are telling me, you need to write in your comment section that you need. So this was just for this thing, but you need to rule out immunological and non-immunological causes of alveolar hemorrhage, especially the anti-basement membrane disease ANCA, and rarely necrotizing sarcoid granulomatosis, because in this particular entity of necrotizing sarcoid granulomatosis you can have features of vasculitis also. So these are the causes of citrophagous in
Dr.
alveoli. Yes, yes.
Excuse me. Immunofluorescence for what antibodies?
Immunofluorescence for?
What
What
antibody?
antibodies?
Immunofluorescence is for IgG. So IgG
Okay, fine.
antibody will highlight the basement membrane. So if it's an anti-basement membrane disease, you will see linear positivity along the alveolar walls.
Okay.
Okay. And
Oh,
what
okay,
else do you have to look for in the case of this anti-GBM disease?
Kidney biopsy as well.
Yeah, you need to look at the systemic manifestations, kidney biopsy, the creatinine might be raised, and you can find some areas of capillaritis as well. So you can take a screenshot of this. This is all what you people have spoken just now: lung infarction, diffuse alveolar hemorrhage, chronic cardiac congestion, chronic alveolar hemorrhage causes like vasculitis, necrotizing sarcoid granulomas, and sometimes in case of pneumoconiosis also you can have these vascular injury, and they can actually mimic siderophagus. Diffuse alveolar hemosiderosis. So, what are the features of chronicity in the lung biopsy? We go by basically what is the pattern of fibrosis. That is the most important thing for us in a lung biopsy, in a chronic lung biopsy. Most likely, I don't think so. They will give you a question where it's only fibrosis, except if it's a typical case of UIP. But you should be knowing, I mean, a gist of everything, so that if anything unusual comes in the exam, at least you should be able to write it. So fibrosis can be peripheral or subpleural. The prototype is UIP. This is a UIP case in which you can see the subpleural kind of fibrosis. Then the fibrosis can be central, peribronchial, or peribronchular, the case of hypersensitivity pneumonitis. And then another point is uniform alveolar septal scarring, which you generally see in non-specific interstitial pneumonitis. Okay. So subpleural is UIP, central is hypersensitivity pneumonitis, and uniform alveolar septal scarring is NSIP. So you can remember that UIP is not related to exogenous, exposure. It is usually found in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is, an acquired or a genetic thing, and it is idiopathic. It doesn't have any cause, so there is no exposure. Hypersensitivity pneumonitis, on the other hand, is related to exposure, so it is more central in nature. So wherever your respiratory bronchioles and terminal bronchioles will come, more fibrosis around that area. And NSIP is most of the time related to a connective tissue disorder or drugs or immunodeficiency. So it is homogeneous everywhere. So next is microscopic honeycombing. Microscopic honeycombing is the end result in any kind of fibrosis. It is not specific for a UIP. Even in cases of co-workers pneumoconiosis, you can see this kind of honeycomb appearance. Okay, these are basically because of the alveolar parenchyma collapse. These cyst-like structures are formed, which are lined by respiratory lining epithelium, and they have this impacted mucin within. And then last but not the least, this is a very important pointer towards your hypersensitivity pneumonitis. This is actually bronchialization of the alveolar spaces. So basically what happens is, I told you a respiratory bronchiole runs with the pulmonary artery, but this is not how a respiratory bronchiole looks. So there will be an inconspicuous respiratory bronchiole in the initial part of the disease. Now, what has happened is the adjacent alveolar spaces have undergone metaplasia, and the lining epithelium has converted itself into a respiratory lining epithelium because of the chronic injury. So this particular phenomena is called as bronchialization or peribronchial metaplasia, or also called as Lambertosis. So this is a table. I know the font is very small, but this is a summary of all the interstitial lung disease. Will be covering how much ever is possible in the stipulated time. You can take a screenshot if you want. So now we come to a case, a 55-year-old man presenting with progressive dyspnea over the past few years. Anybody would like to take it up? You want to explain what you're seeing? Okay, I'll tell you the findings. I'll ask you the diagnosis.
Yes, can I
So
take it? Can I take it? Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, there is peripheral scarring, microscopic honeycomb, fibrosis, septal and paraseptal.
Yes.
I think it fits for UIP, but I need high power to see if there is any fibroblastic foci. It will confirm it more.
Very good, very good. You've covered it all. So this is basically a very what you have to see in UIP cases is a very heterogeneous look. So some areas are absolutely looking like normal lung. However, some areas are showing a lot of fibrosis. And what are these cysts? These cysts stacking over each other. This is called as microscopic honeycombing. Okay. And if you look at the closer part, this is how microscopic honeycombing will look like. This is a subpleural area of fibrosis, and the fibrosis extending into the septal areas. Now, this is an uninvolved area surrounded by a complete fibrotic area, and usually at the interface of an involved and uninvolved area, you see this fibroblastic foci. Why don't you call a fibroblastic plug?
Within the alveolar space that you
Yes, it is not involving the alveolar space
the
itself,
space.
just aligning the base of the alveolar wall or alveolar space, the wall only.
Yes, very good. And the other thing is the mucopolysaccharide material of fibroblastic plug and foci are the same. But the exception is, yes, how you told it, the fibroblastic plugs will actually protrude into the alveolar space. However, these fibroblastic foci will generally try to run parallel to the alveolar space, alveolar wall. Okay. So this is a case of usual interstitial pneumonia pattern of injury. This is a sample report. You can take a screenshot if you want, but so UIP is just a pattern of injury. You can't give a diagnosis of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis if you see a UIP pattern. So to give a diagnosis of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, you have to write in the comment section that everything has to be ruled out. Everything means particle exposure, connective tissue diseases, hypersensitivity pneumonia. Everything needs to be ruled out before you call it an idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And what does that fibroblastic foci mean? So fibroblastic foci actually means that there is ongoing active fibrosis. Okay. And the patient can be given antifibrotic drugs if it's a case of IPF. Okay, so for the people who are for whom uh, these terminologies are new, spatial heterogeneity, what is it? Temporal heterogeneity, what is it? You can take a screenshot. Spatial is patchy across space, and temporal is patchy across time. Okay, so the fibrosis will have different stages, some with new fibrosis, some with old fibrosis. And most importantly, the UIP thing or the IPF will involve the lower lobe or the subpleural dominance. If it is in the upper lobe or it's in the centrilobular areas or upper lobe, what would you think of?
Hypersensitivity.
Yes, you would think of hypersensitivity pneumonitis. So this is a flow chart, how you go about it. You first look at the HRCT. Most of the pathologists who practice lung pathology actually know how to read HRCT also. So you know that there are some entities which have subpleural sparing, there are some entities which have subpleural scarring. So all these you have to know. You need to do serological studies to rule out connective tissue diseases. You need to rule out exposure history. Then what is the occupation of the patient? Is he on any drugs? Are there any systemic features? And then you come to a diagnosis of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. So for further reading, you can actually refer to this article, Modern Pathology 2022. It will give you guidelines how to diagnose UIP case if at all you are a practicing pathologist and you are interested in lung pathology. So next case, anybody would like to take it up?
The all section study shows all the fragments of the lung tissue showing the similar pathology. It appears all are involved, and all are showing this stick chain dilated or dilated dilatation and like honeycombing, ma'am. And there is
No, there is no honeycombing in this.
okay,
There
ma'am.
are some emphysematous changes here, but there is no honeycombing. And for equally involved fragments, you would like to use any better terminology?
Homogen
Temp-
Homogeneity.
yes,
homogeneity.
temporal homogeneity,
Homogeneity.
spatial homogeneity, temporal homogeneity. Okay, all these words have to be used. And so NSIP pattern is actually of three types:
Cellular.
cellular, fibrotic, and mixed pattern. So what do you think this pattern is? Is it cellular, is this fibrotic, or is it mixed?
Mixed, ma'am.
Mixed.
There was some
Yes, it's mixed. It's
lymphocytes
mixed.
and fibrosis is there.
Yes, very good. So you have a focus of lymphocytes here, and otherwise it looks very pink. So all this is collagen, this is fibrosis, and there is a cellular thing here. So it will be a mixed component. So you can take a screenshot if you want, just a sample report of NSIP. And very important in NSIP, you have to rule out an underlying connective tissue disease. You have to rule out drugs or rare viral infections also. So sometimes cases of HIV can also present with NSIP, or sometimes even some occupational exposure or environmental exposure can cause NSIP. So all these things have to be put in the report, and you can actually put an MDT discussion is also required to conclude what kind of injury the patient has undergone.
So, ma'am, I have used the term honeycombing or dilated things. So, what is the correct term that we have to use when we are writing? Should we write as a dilated alveolar spaces or thickened alveolar spaces? Which one will be the correct one? Thickened alveolar spaces.
So you can see the interstitium shows the interstitium appears expanded and fibrotic homogeneously throughout the biopsy, and there are some patchy areas of emphysematous changes because of the breakage of the alveolar interstitium.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay. So anybody would like to take on this case? This is a next case. Very interesting case. Very straightforward case also. So I'll go ahead. Okay, somebody has unmuted. Hello.
I like to that there is some allo spaces which are not normal, but there are some areas which are cellular, ma'am, within the like I don't know
Yes,
peribronchial or
yes, yes, yes,
there are some
yes.
cellular areas that I'm able to see. The
Very good.
peribronchial
So
areas when
if I tell you that those all blue areas were lymphoid follicles, okay.
okay hypersensitivity or
Seems like
Granuloma,
sarcoidosis.
granulomas,
okay
huh?
No, no, these are not granulomas. These are prominent germinal centers with, lymphoid follicles with prominent
Lymphomatoid
germinal centers.
granulosis, lymphomatoid granulomas.
No, there is no angiocentricity as of now, which I've shown you.
Hypersensitivity.
Hypersensitivity could be possible, but I'll show you more areas. So, so you can see there is a lot of plasma cell rich infiltrate.
Autoimmune, yes. NSIP. The pattern of
And
entry is
yeah,
NSIP, but
so this
inflammatory.
is correct. So this is an NSIP pattern, but you have these autoimmune features such as lymphoid aggregates with germinal centers, extensive pleuritis. So this is the pleural surface. And if you have a pleural surface in your biopsy, please look into the pleural surface and look for this pleuritis changes. So this pleuritis is actually a very specific marker for autoimmune disease. This prominent plasma cell infiltrate is again a clincher towards autoimmune disease, and dense perivascular collagen. This is not very specific, but all three things, lymphoid aggregates, pleuritis, prominent plasmacytic infiltrate, this is basically a case of interstitial pneumonia with autoimmune features or IPAF. If you don't want to give it as autoimmune upfront in your exam, you can always write an NSIP pattern, and in the comment section you can mention that you will favor autoimmune over other etiologies because of the look of it. Anybody wants to take up this case? Next case. So this is a one elderly female with mouth dryness. Mouth dryness is a very important clincher, and ANA, anti-double stranded DNA, are both elevated.
Scleroderma.
Sorry?
some I mean with the history
Collagen
it was
vascular disease.
Okay, yes.
Scleroderma.
scleroderma and
Sjogren's syndrome.
So mouth dryness is, yes, Sjogren's
Sjogren's
syndrome.
syndrome.
Very
Yeah.
good.
So
Very
it's an
good.
autoimmune disease. It means also
Yes.
autoimmune pattern of injury.
Yes. And the biopsy looks very blue, isn't it? It looks very, very blue.
Inflammatory.
Yeah, it's inflammatory. Correct.
NSIB
And-
pattern of injury also, I think so. Wow, we
Yes.
have giant cells. We have some
With cholesterol clefts. Yes.
Yeah.
But these giant cells can actually come otherwise also in NSIB cases also. If you don't have any exposure history, you would not like to give it as HP. You would still like to give it as NSIB.
Yes.
And-
the history fits with autoimmune disease.
Yes. And this is the respiratory bronchiole. You can see these lymphocytes are actually going inside the respiratory bronchiole. What is this? This is a red flag. Would you like to do anything about it?
Can we do IF immunofluorescence?
Is followable.
We have to do IHC, not immunofluorescence. We have to do immunohistochemistry, right?
I want to do
Because
a kappa
this-
lambda.
Yes.
To
So
rule
what
out
is this lesion
melanoma.
called as? What is this lesion called as?
Like lymphoepithelial.
Very good. Lymphoepithelial lesion. So we would like
Low-grade
to,
lymphoma.
yes,
You have
we
to
would like to
normal.
confirm.
Ma-
We would like to confirm that it's reactive or a population or a lymphoma here. So we would do IHC. The panel will include 320-48 kappa lambda Eber. And if at all this is a reactive or polymorphous population and you have anti-double stranded DNA being elevated, so it's autoimmune. What are you expecting in the panel to come positive? So I am expecting that, okay, fine, 320 admixture will come. 8 will probably be more than 4 because it's a cytotoxic T cell which is usually elevated in an autoimmune background. And kappa lambda should be equal if it's an autoimmune etiology,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So this case turned out to be polyclonal. The lymphoid cells are polyclonal in nature. So now what would you label this case as?
Autoimmune.
Autoimmune is okay, but yeah, so there is an entity called as lymphocytic interstitial pneumonia, LIP, lymphoid interstitial pneumonia. So you don't have typical lymphoid follicles with germinal centers. You have more of a lymphoma-like look here. So it is better to term it as lymphoid interstitial pneumonia and tell the doctor that please put him on a follow-up because these cases are prone to convert into a lymphoma later on follow-up. Okay, so these are the causes of lymphoid interstitial pneumonia. Very important autoimmune causes: Sjogren's, rheumatoid arthritis, and a whole set of other etiologies. HIV and Epstein-Barr virus, remember. All these red things, please remember because these will help you to write your answer in the exam. So next case, you have the IHC panel with you. It's a similar looking case. You have a lymphoepithelial lesion right there.
So marginal zone lymphoma.
Yes, very good. Marginal zone lymphoma. So marginal zone lymphoma will have CD43 and IgM positive, and it will show monoclonality on kappa or lambda light chain. So it's basically because of chronic inflammation or infection, long term or autoimmunity. And these are the various IHC markers which you have to put in the panel. So lymphomatoid granulomatosis, coming to this entity, it's a very, very rare entity and caused by EBV infection in immunocompromised or elderly patients. And these patients usually will present as nodules, nodular lesions in the lung with vague B symptoms. So you will have these central areas. So these are the nodules you can see on radiology, and on the cross you can see these nodules, very pale nodules. Why are these pale? Because the patient has undergone infarction because of the angiocentric invasion of the lymphoid cells. The patient has undergone infarction in this area. That's why these are very pale looking nodules. So you can see this ongoing infarction here, surrounded by a good amount of lymphocytic infiltrate here. And you will have these few large cells, which these large cells are actually positive for CD20 and EBER-ish. So based on how many EBV positive cells you can see on the slide, it's divided into grade 1, grade 2, and grade 3. Grade 1 is less than 5 per high power field, grade 2 is 5 to 50, and grade 3 is more than 50 per high power field. The important point to remember here is that IHC will resemble your T cell rich B cell lymphoma. That means all the lymphoid cells which are in the background will highlight for CD3, and the large atypical cells will highlight for CD20, and EBV will be positive in these large cells. So it's not a very difficult thing to remember that lymphomatoid granulomatosis will follow the IHC pattern of T cell rich B cell lymphoma. Okay, the differentials, again, Wegener's granulomatosis is an important differential if you miss out on these atypical large looking lymphoid cells. Okay, very important to screen Wegener's cases on high power so that you don't miss this entity, especially if the patient is immunocompromised. The second thing is nasal type T NK cell lymphoma. In the T NK cell lymphomas, these large cells will actually be positive for T cell markers, not B cell markers. Okay, and PTLD will show almost same immunophenotype, except that the patient will have a transplant history. So this, you should remember that all these hematological malignancies like Hodgkin's lymphoma, Rosai-Dorfman disease, all these can, and PTLD, they can come in lung also. And more so, PTLD is very, very common in lung transplant patients because it comes very early. It comes almost less than 11 months after the transplant is done. So if you look at the lung transplant and the kidney transplant patients, PTLD is found in 5% of lung transplant patients as opposed to 1% in kidney transplant patients. Okay, and it is an EBV related disorder, and the rest, you know, it's of 3 types: polymorphic PTLD, monomorphic PTLD, classical Hodgkin's lymphoma. You can go through the IHC markers for all these entities. So this image is showing what is this image? If you get this slide, you should be able to recognize what is it.
EBER-ish.
EBV-ish.
Yes, very good. EBER-ish. And why is it not EBV, LMP, IHC?
Membranous staining
This is
in
nuclear,
LMP.
nuclear staining.
Nuclear staining, very good.
Here,
And the other thing is the color. The
blue.
EBV-ish, yes, is blue with a pink background. The IHC slide will always be, you know, your
Brown.
conventional IHC slides, hematoxylin background and DAB. So next case, 68-year-old man, ex-smoker, presented with cough. Now they are giving you a history of ex-smoker. They are trying to deviate to you towards one diagnosis in this case.
LCH or desquamative.
Desquamative interstitial pneumonia.
Yeah, very good. Anybody can explain what is happening here?
Some giant cells are there.
Yes, those are actually histiocytic giant cells. And these alveolar spaces are filled with these plump, very, you know, fat looking histiocytes, and many of these histiocytes have these engulfed pigment also. What is this pigment here? Patient is an ex-smoker.
Smoker macrophages.
Very good. So whose voice is this? I want to give you a free gift. You are very intelligent. So these are the multinucleated giant cells, and there is some neutrophilic reaction around it. You can find some eosinophils, lymphocytes, plasma cells also. Okay, but that should not deviate you from your diagnosis. So this is a case of desquamative interstitial pneumonitis. Since you have a history of smoking in this case, plus you have those smokers macrophages, just give a diagnosis of desquamative interstitial pneumonitis and tell that you want to correlate it with the bowel fluid, which will show predominance of smokers macrophages. You can do Pearl stain. Now, it is very important to know that Pearl stain will also highlight iron in pigmented histiocytes. Okay, so Pearl stain, if you want to use it to differentiate between smokers macrophages and diffuse alveolar hemosiderosis, it might not help. Plus, you saw a lot of giant cells there. You would like to do ZN-PS-GMS to confirm the absence of organisms and correlate with HRCT findings with MDT discussion. If smoking history is not given to you, you should refrain yourself from calling it DIP. Just give it as benign interstitial lung disease with DIP-like histology and to correlate with history of smoking. You will still get full marks, don't worry. So next we come to granulomas. So granulomas in lung are n number of reasons. I have just tried to incorporate some of the important ones. These are like tuberculosis, non-tuberculous mycobacteria, histoplasmosis, coccidioidomycosis, sarcoidosis, hypersensitivity pneumonitis, granulomatosis with polyangiitis or GPA, foreign body granuloma, berylliosis, and malignancy associated granulomas. So what is this? This everybody should be able to answer. What is it? Quickly.
Rheumatoid.
Very good. Tuberculosis. What will you suggest in your answer? What do you want to do?
Culture and
Zeren
And
staining.
PCR, especially
Yes.
AFB and the PCR.
Yes. And would you like to suggest PSGMS also?
Yes.
Yes,
Or
to
you
rule
would
out,
just
to rule out
Yes.
fungal infection.
Very good, very good. So in your special stain section, don't refrain yourself to only ZN stains, because ho sakta hai ZN stain will come out to be negative and then PSGMS will actually help you fetch marks in this. Okay, so this is a tuberculous granuloma. We know what it is. I'm not going into the details of it. Now, next is histoplasmosis. Histoplasmosis is very important. Usually it happens in immunocompromised individuals, and usually you will see these very, very, bubbly, fat looking ballooned kind of histiocytes with these small organisms which actually look like LD bodies, but they are not LD bodies. Please don't confuse them with LD bodies. These are actually histoplasmosis. If you have a little bit doubt that ye histoplasmosis hai ya cryptococcus hai, you compare it with the size of the RBC. If it is almost equal to the size of RBC, it is likely to be histoplasmosis. The other feature which will help you differentiate histoplasmosis from cryptococcus is that these macrophages, this intracytoplasmic kind of thing, it generally happens in histoplasmosis, while cryptococcus is generally engulfed by these giant cells which come to rescue. Next is coccidioidomycosis. Just for your information, if you can see a fungus, if you can point out a fungus from low power, then it is either coccidioidomycosis or it is blastomyces. Then if you have a doubt of rhinosporidiosis in the lung, always consider a diagnosis of coccidioidomycosis. Rhinosporidiosis lung mein generally you don't see, but if you are seeing rhinosporidiosis like things, like big things with a lot of endospores, please consider a diagnosis of coccidioidomycosis. Again, it will present like flu-like symptoms and granulomatous reaction. Okay, so another case, anybody would like to take up this case? It's a very interesting case. Allergic fungal, it goes on the same lines as allergic fungal rhinosinusitis. Okay, so there is a dilated bronchiole. Okay, so there is bronchiectasis, some amount of bronchiectasis, and then you can see this allergic mucin. Allergic mucin is nothing but it is a very red looking mucin. There are a lot of degranulated eosinophils there, and you can see a lot of eosinophils entrapped within this allergic mucin. And if you do some special stains, you will be able to see some fungal organisms. So this is nothing but ABPA, a case of ABPA. ABPA full form is allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis. So if you have a doubt of allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis, you can actually compare your mucin with with the one you find in allergic rhinosinusitis, allergic fungal rhinosinusitis. Both of them are actually the same diseases. They are hypersensitivity reaction to colonization of the airways by Aspergillus species, most commonly Aspergillus fumigatus. And these patients usually have asthma or cystic fibrosis, but it can happen in otherwise healthy individuals also in cases of bronchiectasis. PAS-GMS stain is very important to identify these fungal hyphae, correlate with the bowel fluid and sputum findings. And if there is a case of Aspergillus, it is very important that you write in your comment section that you want to correlate it with serum IgG to Aspergillus, serum IgE levels, or eosinophilia count and eosinophilia count. So if you find an Aspergillus in the lung, there are other three things you need to see. Is the Aspergillus invasive, non-invasive, or is it within a pre-existing cavity, such as in a tuberculosis patient where there is a cavity and the fungus likes that, upper lobe, good atmosphere, it forms a ball there sitting like an aspergilloma. So there are three other entities other than ABPA, which you need to remember: invasive aspergillosis, non invasive aspergillosis, and aspergilloma. So, another case, anybody would like to take it up? This is a case from Leeds. I think you should be able to answer. Okay, so you see dilated bronchiole here. The bronchiolar lumen shows something, some foreign body, some brownish material here. Lot of anthracotic pigment in the vicinity of this bronchiole. Okay, so this patient has definitely undergone some major exposure, maybe to coal or anthracotic pigment from whatever reason. Lot of fibrosis which is extending into the septa, into the interlobular septa. Okay, and if you go on the high power, you can see this anthracotic pigment. It is actually black in color. The lumen of the bronchiole is showing fungal hyphae. And what are these? These are conidiophores, or we call it as fruiting bodies. So this is a case of lung anthracosilicosis with an aspergilloma or aspergillosis. You need to know that there are two diagnoses in this, and even if you miss one diagnosis, your marks will get deducted. So please mention to write. Don't forget. Don't think that okay, fine, I found aspergillus, over. Try to see, because on the low power only you are able to see that there is a lot of carbon pigment there. You can't miss it. So next we come on to a case of sarcoidosis. In sarcoidosis, you have a very specific history that there are enlarged mediastinal lymph nodes also, and there are some hilar shadows. Okay. And if the lymph node is sampled, you'll find these non-caseating, very naked looking granulomas. And if you sample the bronchioles, you will find these peribronchiolar distribution of naked granulomas. And you might find these asteroidal Schaumann bodies. Initially, they were thought to be very specific for sarcoidosis, but now you know that they can be found in other cases as well, like hypersensitivity to pneumonitis, and or for that matter, even in healed tuberculosis patients. So, some important points to remember about sarcoidosis patients. It generally happens in young adults, 20 to 40 years, with a slight female predominance. And patients usually have bilateral hilar lymphadenopathy. The scadding stages, you should be aware of that there are 4 stages according to which we stage the patient on radiology, depending upon whether the patient has bilateral hilar lymphadenopathy or infiltrates only or fibrosis. And very important, you need to remember this Lofgren syndrome, Hereford syndrome, because this can come as a history to you. A patient has bilateral hilar lymphadenopathy with erythema nodosum, arthralgia, fever. We need to remember this Lofgren syndrome to correlate. Hereford syndrome, you have uveitis, parotid enlargement, and facial palsy. So, very important to remember, another point is that bowel fluid has a high CD4 to CD8 ratio, and the serum ACE levels are elevated. So whenever you write in your comments, please write that correlate with the bowel fluid cytology. First of all, lymphocytosis will help you, come to a point that, okay, fine, it could be sarcoidosis. In that lymphocyte count also, if you do a flow, CD4, CD8 ratio is high. So you can actually pinpoint to a diagnosis in especially sarcoidosis that it could be sarcoidosis. So next case, anybody would like to take this up? So it's a 48-year-old male. You already have a history of blood breeder.
Yes, granuloma.
Yes,
Hypersensitivity
HP,
pneumonitis.
yes, HP with the history also bird breeder.
Very good, very good. What is this phenomena? What is this phenomena? What is this happening?
Metaplasia.
Very good.
Bronchial metaplasia.
Very good, very good. And there are some giant cell with cholesterol clefts. This is the sample report. Okay, you will label it as chronic hypersensitivity pneumonitis, and you will give a comment that antigen exposure, radiological correlation is required. And because you have giant cells, don't forget to mention special stains, ZNPS, GMS. And another thing you need to remember in hypersensitivity is you can be given any sort of history. So all these things you should be aware of. Key patient is a farmer or a bird poultry handler or a grain processor he works in. Okay, so all these things you should be aware of. So this, just to summarize the bile fluid thing. So if there are more number of lymphocytes in the bile fluid, that is lymphocytosis, you need to think about hypersensitivity pneumonitis and sarcoidosis. Most important. Okay, these two are the most important. The others will be connective tissue diseases, bronchiolitis, and lymphoproliferative disorders. If you have eosinophilia, you need to think about acute eosinophilic pneumonia, chronic eosinophilic pneumonia, parasitic infections, bronchopulmonary aspergillosis, drugs, Churg-Strauss, and so on. And if you have both lymphocytosis and eosinophilia, the first thing will be drug-induced and parasitic fungal infection. So next is a case of patients with waxing and waning lung lesions. Okay, he had an episode of hemoptysis, and his ANCA has also turned out to be positive.
GP, there is a huge area of necrosis. And,
yes. So
wall.
what kind of, yes, very good. So this
Geographic
bluish kind of, correct. So this bluish kind of necrosis, you can see the bluish necrosis, okay, is very, very convinced. I mean, it gives you a direction that you should think of vasculitis, you should think of GPA. Because in TB or fungus, if you look, the necrosis is very pink. If you have a blue necrosis with a pink center, definitely, I mean, when the lesions heal, they will become eventually pink. But if you have a lot of nuclear debris inside the necrosis, you should think of GPA or a vasculitis picture. And you should always look for a large or medium, I mean medium arteries or small arteries, not the large arteries, sorry, the medium or small arteries for a necrotizing vasculitis. Okay, whenever you find this kind of picture, please mention in your paper that it's a necrotizing vasculitis. If you so if you write only vasculitis, it may not be that specific, but necrotizing vasculitis is very specific for your ANCA. So in the comment section, you know the drill: serology, special stains, clinical radiological evaluation. And if you don't find the vasculitis focus, please mention that you can't still rule out an infective etiology, or for that matter, even a rheumatoid nodule, because all of that will look the same. So you give the differentials according to what you see. If you have a clear-cut focus of vasculitis, don't hesitate yourself from giving the differentials of GPA. Another case is a Churg-Strauss disease. It has similar look as GPA, except the eosinophils are too much, and it's a clinical triad. The patient has asthma, eosinophil vasculitis. I mean, sometimes you get this triad, but most of the times you don't get this triad, and you have to suggest the clinician that please do P-ANCA. So in the laboratory findings, eosinophilia is the hallmark. P-ANCA is positive. The IgE levels are often raised, and a patient will have hypergammaglobulinemia with a normochromic anemia. So again, this is a case of blue necrosis. A 50-year-old male smoker, incidental lung lesion to rule out malignancy. And the blue necrosis is actually undergoing cavitation. Smoker, does it point towards anything? So I know it's an autoimmune thing. I know it happens most commonly in smokers. So this is basically an example of a rheumatoid nodule in the lung. So if you look at the literature of the rheumatoid nodule, it has classic three zones: fibrinoid necrosis, then there is a surrounding layer of epithelioid histiocytes, okay, and there is this chronic inflammatory infiltrate, which is lymphocytes, plasma cells. So why, how can we come directly to a conclusion of rheumatoid nodule? It is difficult, definitely. You need to write necrotizing granulomatous, and you can give a diagnosis, a differential of rheumatoid nodule first in your paper. Okay, but since the history has been mentioned as smoker, so usually rheumatoid nodules will present in smokers, and it's an extra articular manifestation of rheumatoid arthritis in seropositive individuals. So, as usual, you need to give special stains to rule out other causes and differential diagnosis, which will include GPA, infectious granuloma, and silicotic nodules, and so on. So, when I was giving my exam for FRC path, we had got a case of pleuritis with palisaded granuloma. So, I thought I'll just put this slide also, because you need to know the reasons. It can happen in autoimmune diseases, infections, foreign body reactions, and chronic effusions. And the most common causes, they say, is rheumatoid pleuritis again. Then you have GPA, sarcoidosis, TB, and cholesterol granulomas. And if you have increased number of eosinophils in the vicinity of those granulomas, don't forget to put parasite also as the etiology. Next is a case of 60-year-old male patient, has a previous throat cancer, mass in right lung, right upper lobectomy. So whenever they give you a history of previous some cancer, either they are indicating ki okay, it could be a mets, or they are indicating fine, the patient might be immunocompromised because he has undergone some chemotherapy for the throat cancer. So you have to look at it both ways. Okay. uh, so anybody would like to take on this? It's a pink necrosis in the center and surrounded by epithelioid histiocytes. And you see some organisms here which are very, yes, very good. This is a case of Cryptococcus. You can see the organisms have a very thick wall. Okay, the wall is actually standing out. See, and if at all you are not able to come to a conclusion that this is a case of Cryptococcus, you can just mention that this is a fungal granuloma, and you can mention your differentials and to correlate with the PCR. Okay. This is a GMS stain. You can see these cryptococcal organisms here. They are actually narrow based. So usually this Cryptococcus is caused by Cryptococcus neoformans, and these are round to oval yeast forms with a thick mucopolysaccharide capsule. And very important staining is mucicarmine stain, which can highlight the capsule as pink red. And if it forms a mass-like lesion within the bronchus, we call it as a cryptococoma, just like an aspergilloma. So rarely you might get these kind of cases where you have these talc particles within the giant cells. So this usually we see in intravenous drug abusers, because talc is used as a filler agent in these intravenous drugs, and when the drugs passes through the pulmonary circulation, this talc is actually eaten by these histiocytes and they show this reaction. So talc granulomatous in intravenous drug abuse, and these are actually refractile on polarizing light. This picture is showing some foreign body material, and there is some giant cell reaction around it. This is actually a case of aspiration pneumonia. If the patient is debilitated, or patient has some neuromuscular disorder involving the esophagus, or a brain tumor, or patient has some GERD like symptoms, you should always look for aspiration pneumonia. So I'll not read through it. Next is a 65-year-old male presented with lung nodules. A very straightforward case. Anybody would like to describe? So these are very well-defined nodules, and you can see that they are very collagen-rich.
SFT, ma'am. So there are
Silicotic.
lots of
It's a silicotic nodule. It's a silicotic nodule. They are very collagen rich. And this pigment, so much of pigment around this nodule and within the nodule, it should give you an idea. Okay, fine, this is silica. Silica is basically nothing but dust. Okay, so people who are involved in construction work, construction sites, or drilling kind of activity, they get exposed to this thing and they get this silicotic nodules. They will generally present as incidental nodules. So you need to know the pathological findings you will find in coal mine dust lung disease. Silicotic nodules you've just seen, they can be macules. Macules are nothing but intracellular coal dust particles around the respiratory bronchioles. And then you have this entity called as progressive massive fibrosis, which we used to read in our undergraduate days. It's basically a collagenous fibrosis area which exceeds 1 centimeter in diameter with or without vascular obliteration. So this is just to show you, this is how a macule looks like. It is not forming nodule. These are just anthracotic or pigment laden macrophages which are there in the around the respiratory bronchioles. Okay, this is a spotter, guys. 50-year-old male, dyspnea, cough for 5 months.
PAP.
Very good, PAP. Okay, so it's a 50-year-old male. It's not a child. So what would you like to put in your comment section?
Rule out pneumocystis cerevisiae.
Okay, they've given you silver stain and you've ruled it out. Then what will you put?
No, the surfactant.
cystic fibrosis.
No,
Edema.
Dilated duct.
Pulmonary
Dilated.
edema. Pulmonary
Sorry?
edema. Edema.
Pulmonary edema.
Edema.
No, I am not asking about the differentials. I'm asking what are the causes of PAP in a 50-year-old male?
Heart problem,
Are there
congestive
any
heart failure,
Heart failure.
Secondary to hematolymphoid
congestive heart
malignancy.
failure.
heart failure will have siderophages. It won't have this kind of proteinaceous material. So this is definitely a proteinaceous granular material with some cholesterol clefts. You can see nice cholesterol clefts. So it's a lipoproteinaceous kind of material. Okay. And do you know about any IHCs which are available for surfactant proteins? So in this case, in a 50-year-old male, it's a case of acquired pulmonary alveolar proteinosis. We have to advise number 1 for immunohistochemistry of surfactant proteins, that is SPA, SPB. Okay. So if you find it positive in the alveolar material, it is supportive of a surfactant accumulation. Secondly, you need to go testing for an anti-GM-CSF antibodies if autoimmune PAP is suspected. And thirdly, secondary causes like hematological malignancies, inhalational exposures have to be ruled out. So this is the cytology of PAP. It is a very non-specific thing unless and until your clinician puts this doubt in your mind. You will not even think of PAP. But when you see a dirty smear and grossly you see a very milky kind of bile fluid with cloudy sedimentation, you should always do a PS and PS with diastase on your smears, because this material is PS positive diastase resistant. So this is what I was asking you about. So if a patient has presented with PAP in the 3rd to 5th decade, auto antibodies for GM-CSF antibodies have to be done. Okay, because it's like an autoimmune condition here. Then you can have it in late infancy or childhood, which is congenital PAP, and secondary PAP, you need to rule out silica, dust, aluminium, fiberglass. You can just write exposure history, that's all, and infection. So anybody, this is a spotter. You have been given known case of carcinoma stomach post CT6 cycles. That means either the patient has carcinoma stomach mets, or the patient is immunocompromised.
Pneumocystis.
Yes. Very good. So anybody would like to describe the pneumocystis fungal organisms? How do they look?
Cup-shaped organisms.
Very good. So you can see very nice cups here. Okay. For those who don't know, these cups are very, very specific for pneumocystis. So just mention that you need a PCR, which is a gold standard, if you don't have a GMS stain. Okay, otherwise you can mention that this is just a simple and plain case of pneumocystis, and you can go for a PCR, which is the gold standard if clinically indicated. And if there is a history of immunosuppression, then it's fine. Otherwise, go for HIV testing or any other immunosuppression status. So sometimes these patients can also present with granulomatous inflammation, and in these cases you need to think about dual pathology rather than a single pathology first, because these cases are immunosuppressed. What if they are having both TB and pneumocystis together? Okay, so always write that you need a ZN stain also, you need a TB PCR also to rule out dual pathology. This is how the cytology smears the pneumocystis looks like, very frothy cotton ball kind of appearance, and the background cells will all be benign, and the GMS stain will show you fungal organisms, fungal spores. Okay, very characteristic, clincher case, 35-year-old female, so female in reproductive age group, presented with pneumothorax.
Lymphangioleo.
Yes. Yes. Anybody can tell me what is the IHC markers you want to do?
HMB45, SMA, and
Yes.
T.
Melanae, Picoma family tumor.
Yes, very good. Very good. So IHC you need to do. And what is the syndrome they are associated with?
Tuberous sclerosis.
Tuberous sclerosis.
Very good. And what is the renal tumor they are associated with?
Angiomyolipoma.
AML.
Very good. So everything you've told me, HMB45 will be patchy positive in these cells, and then these cells are also positive for beta catenin, and very important, they're always positive for hormonal markers, ER and PR. And sometimes they can also present you as nodules. Not always they will present you as cysts. So be sure of that also. They will actually look like smooth muscle cells to you. So you need to give your differentials very carefully. It could be a smooth muscle tumor versus sometimes you can also give a differential of metastatic clear cell or pulmonary Langhans cell histiocytosis, depending upon how it looks. These are not the sure shot differentials, but these are just the differentials if it looks like that. And the clinical differentials of LAM, very important, is central lobular emphysema, because the clinician might not have thought about it, and he will send you as a simple case of central lobular emphysema. If the patient is of a reproductive age group or a young female, and you have some doubt of tuberous sclerosis or some renal tumor, please have your lights on, the brain lights on, and think about LAM. The other thing is bird hog Dubé syndrome. Bird hog Dubé syndrome will have other things like fibrofolliculomas and renal cell carcinomas. And very important, the bird hog Dubé syndrome, the cysts don't have that smooth muscle, wall around them. They are very simple cysts, and they're usually in the lower lobes of the lung. In emphysematous lung, you will just see these broken alveolar septae, and you can compare this normal alveoloparenchyma with the emphysematous area. This is completely gone. Okay, so next is a young male smoker, cough, presented with some lung nodules, a very busy looking slide. There are some histiocytes, looks like
LCH.
histiocytes. Yes, very
Histiocytosis.
good. Very good. So there are some eosinophils here, and there are some multinucleated cells here. Can you please explain what are the characteristics of these cells, LCH cells?
Grooving.
Nuclear grooves.
Yes.
Kidney-shaped nucleus.
Yes, very good.
Eosinophil rich infiltrate is also there in the background.
Yes, yes. And what is the treatment?
BRAF inhibitors.
BRAF targeted.
Yes, very good. First
Vemurafenib.
treatment is smoking cessation. So if there are smaller nodules, the patient quits smoking, these nodules will disappear. If at all it's a bigger nodule, or there are some, some risk factors, the patient has a bad prognosis because some immunocompromised status, or there are some systemic manifestations like some lytic lesions in the bones and things like that, then BRAF inhibitors and some chemotherapy can be given. But otherwise, smoking cessation is the first treatment. The IHC of this is S100, CD1A, Langerin. S100, CD1A, and Langerin are very, very important. And what do you find in electron microscopy? Anybody?
And extracted appearance.
Perfect
Kinase racket appearance.
Very good, very good. We have a very intelligent audience today. So, what is this? Quickly, anybody? Very eosinophilic.
Amyloidosis.
Very good. So this is a case of nodular amyloidosis, usually incidentally found in lung biopsies. Okay, these may have foreign body type of giant cells, calcification, ossification, and cartilage. Then what is this? This is a tracheobronchial biopsy, cartilage you can see, and there is a lot of eosinophilic material here.
Amartoma.
No. This is also a case of amyloid, but it is tracheobronchial amyloidosis. So tracheobronchial amyloidosis is also an incidentally found amyloidosis, okay, and it is usually not associated with systemic amyloidosis. Now, what is this?
Perivascular amyloid.
Yes. So if you have your lung parenchyma and you see the septal amyloidosis means you have this amyloid deposits around your vessels, then you need to give a diagnosis of diffuse alveolar septal amyloidosis. This is a very important diagnosis because this is related to your systemic amyloidosis. The previous two, amyloid, tracheobronchial amyloid, nodular amyloid, these are not related to systemic amyloidosis, but diffuse alveolar septal amyloidosis is related, and you need to do all your tests. Congo red, everybody knows, apple green birefringence. You need to do all your tests on septal amyloidosis case. You need to do typing, kappa lambda light chains, AA protein, transthyretin, mass spectrometry, special stains, you know what it is, Congo red, polarized light, PS. So Congo red, so amyloid is basically PS negative, silver negative deposits. And if you write some thioflavin T, crystal violet, fluorescent dyes, that will add to your score. You can take a screenshot of this particular thing if you want to. And yes, very important. If there is a septal amyloidosis or an AL amyloidosis, kappa lambda, if kappa or lambda shows restriction, you need to suggest a myeloma workup also. Okay, so what is this? Very hemorrhagic kind of appearance with one vessel probably showing a thrombus. Okay.
Pulmonary thrombosis.
Pulmonary
Very good.
thrombosis. Very good. So the examiner wants to give you a hint. Okay, elderly man, pale area in the lung. Pale area means the blood supply is gone. So
Pulmonary.
so this is pulmonary infarction secondary to a pulmonary thrombus. Okay, lung is one of the organs which undergoes hemorrhagic necrosis. What are the other organs which undergo hemorrhagic necrosis?
Kidney and spleen.
Kidneys.
Brain.
Ovary, intestine.
Brain is
Testis.
correct. Intestine is correct.
Testis.
Huh?
Liver.
Yes, liver, correct. So all the organs which have a dual supply, dual blood supply, will undergo hemorrhagic necrosis. And what are lines of Zahn? Anybody knows about lines of Zahn? This is an undergraduate question.
To differentiate between the postmortem and
Alternate areas of fibrin and platelet.
Correct, correct. So if you see these lines of Zahn in a thrombus, you know that it's an antemortem thrombus. It's a real thrombus. It's not formed after the death. Okay, and these are basically the lines of Zahn basically reflect the steps in which the thrombus has formed, fibrin, platelets, and so on. Okay, and this is an area of organizing thrombus in the same patient. So this is a case of pulmonary infarction. You need to know the risk factors of pulmonary infarction, and D-dimer testing is very important because a negative result essentially will rule out a pulmonary embolism. Okay, beware of dual pathology cases. This was a case of pulmonary infarction with adjoining areas of bronchopneumonia. So very important gross examination. You can get something like this as well. You need to look at the vessels very carefully. There are nice thrombi completely occluding the vessels. Okay, and some pale zones have already started, to appear. You can see these pale zones. It's not homogeneous. And what is this?
A wedge-shaped infarct.
Yes, it's a wedge-shaped infarct. Correct. So this is a case of bone marrow embolus. Just to show you how it looks, you can do a Alredo stain or Sudan black stain to highlight fat emboli if you have a frozen section. And this is how an amniotic fluid embolization looks like. This is a postpartum female who presented with chest discomfort and passed soon after. Okay, spotter. Anybody?
Hydatid cyst.
Yeah, very good. Hydatid cyst. This is a lamellated membrane of hydatid cyst. And what are these?
Scolex.
Protoscolysis.
Protoscolysis. Very good.
Scolysis.
Protoscolysis. Very good. And this is the fibroinflammatory response which is happening around the hydatid cyst. So this is a case of hydatid cyst. And you need to write these words like laminated membranes, protoscolysis, hooklets, everything. Okay. So this is a case of some lesion, okay, in the lung. A lobectomy has been done. Very ill-defined lesion in a middle-aged female. You can see that it looks essentially from on the low bar only. It seems to be like a spindle cell kind of lesion. There are some storiform kind of areas here, and these spindle cells are kind of going into the septa and entrapping the alveolar spaces here. I'll show you the low part of it. So very spindly cells. So this is not spindled only. So this is not only fibrous. This is fibro-inflammatory. You can see a lot of dots here, right? So these are all inflammatory cells. And yes, very good, very good. And these are all entrapped alveolar spaces because the lining epithelium looks quite innocent. They are not, bad looking cells. They are not malignant cells. Again, just to reiterate, these are all lymphoplasmacytic cell infiltrate and myofibroblastic kind of cells. So this is a case of inflammatory myofibroblastic tumor, and this can be given in the exam because generally it doesn't require any IHC. If you are in a doubt, you can always say that it's a benign fibroinflammatory tumor and give your differential that it could be an IFMT. And if it's a clear-cut case of IFMT, you can write in the comments that IHC may be done because 40% of these tumors show ALK1 positivity, and SMA is always positive. Okay, so this is one of our case. This case is shared by Dr. Vidya. She's my senior consultant. This you can see this is a respiratory bronchiole, and there is quite expanded stroma here with these round monotonous looking cells. Okay, and the stromal cells are actually pushing the alveoli. They are compressing the alveoli, and the alveoli are lined by very benign appearing cells. These are all type 2 pneumocytes. Okay, So a closer look on these stromal cells, very round looking cells. They don't look like lymphocytes. They are bigger than lymphocytes. They have a very, vesicular nucleus, pale looking chromatin, and there is no necrosis, there is no mitosis, there is not much atypia also. There are areas of sclerosis here. Anybody guesses?
Polytry fibrous tumor.
No. Okay.
Coma?
Okay. It could be. Huh?
Coma?
PCOMA. Yes, PCOMA is a good differential. Yes. Any other differential? Okay, I'm going to show you the slides, the IHC slides. So this is a CK stain highlighting the alveolar spaces. Okay. Then this is CK7. You see the respiratory bronchioles being highlighted. And then this is TTF. TTF is highlighting
Sclerosing
Sclerosing
pneumocytoma.
Sclerosing pneumocytoma, yeah.
Very good. So TTF is the clincher here. TTF, the sclerosing pneumocytoma, I think is the only entity where in TTF highlights these stromal cells. Okay. And this is a potential long case. You should be knowing that if the patient is a non-smoker, he's a younger patient, and presents with a well circumscribed peripheral lesion in the lung, okay, which is not looking upfront malignant and has some sclerosis. So sclerosis in itself is a very, soft pointer that it's a slow growing tumor. Okay, wherever you see sclerosis, just it should just hit you. Okay, fine, it could be a slow growing tumor. Okay, it's not a malignant, it is not a very aggressive tumor here. So IHC, you've told me TTF1 is positive in epithelial and stromal cells, and if napsin A is there, so you can always compare TTF1 and napsin. TTF1 is usually too many cells are positive on TTF1 as compared to napsin A in a case of sclerosing pneumocytoma. So this is an indolent tumor which is composed of dual population of cuboidal surface cells resembling type 2 pneumocytes and stromal round cells. And generally, these are solitary peripheral masses, well circumscribed, and these are usually associated with ACT1 mutations, which are the molecular hallmark of pulmonary sclerosing pneumocytoma. Okay, you were just remembering this case and it has come. A case of lobar lobectomy, and this lesion is just near to the bronchial resection margin. What would you tell the doctor? What is it? You can see some lobules of cartilage here. Some epithelial
Chondroid
things are
hematoma.
entrapped. Some adipose tissue is also entrapped. Some mesenchymal cells. Yes.
Hematoma.
Pulmonary chondroid hematoma.
Pulmonary
It's
hematoma.
it is better to call it hematoma because you have mesenchymal elements, you have epithelial elements, you have fat, you have cartilage. Okay, so it's better to limit yourself to a pulmonary hematoma. You will definitely get full marks, and not to call it a chondroid hematoma. Chondroid hematoma is no longer term used. Okay, and if you look at the low part, it will actually give you sometimes a look of a fibroadenoma, fibroepithelial proliferation, which is benign. So most hematomas harbor translocations which are often 312, and they are positive for ER/PR/AR. And this you can write in your comment section that sex steroid receptors can be done and translocations can be done. Okay. Okay. So what are these incidental findings in the lung? Anybody? Oh, these are very round, homogeneous looking cells in nests.
Meningothelial meningioma.
Meningothelial nodule.
Nodule.
Okay, that is also coming, but this is in particular a neuroendocrine tumorlet.
Carcinoid tumorless.
Yes, yes. So, and the next is, as you people said, meningothelial nodules. Okay, these have a very syncytial kind of appearance.
What about glomus tumor in the lung? Is it common to see it in the lung? Glomus.
It will be a very blue appearance. It will look like a neuroendocrine, except the chromatin will be different and the cytoplasm, which will be more than a neuroendocrine cell. And if you compare neuroendocrine with glomus, glomus is a single thing and neuroendocrine can be multiple, like in multiple nests. But yes, you need IHC to confirm. you can find glomus in lung, but it's very rare. So you should go for the more commoner differentials first. So these are the benign mimics of malignancy which we've covered. Uh, these are inflammatory myofibroblastic, sclerosing pneumocytoma, Hodgkin's, lymphomatoid, PTLD, polymorphic variant, and Rosai-Hoffman syndrome. I've not put a photo of Rosai-Hoffman syndrome. What is the characteristic picture of Rosai-Hoffman syndrome? Anybody?
Erypoiesis.
Yes, it's a very blue-looking tumor. You will get these sheets of histiocytes, and these histiocytes will be showing these emperipoiesis phenomena. Okay. Then dip neck, benign hematomas. Thank you for listening. I have some more slides also, but I think that's it. We have already exceeded the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
You're
you,
most
Dr. Tripti. It was
welcome.
extensive, and you have touched almost all the benign entity possible. So I was initially counting how much you were enumerating, but lastly I gave up. So exactly. So we have almost touched all the possible entities possible in the benign lung, and obviously you have touched all the benign, that mimics the malignancy like IMT and all that. So in practically it is enriching, and thank you because you have given the salient points that is useful for the attendees who are appearing for
Yes.
the exam in both autumn and spring sessions and all that. So
Yes. I
yeah,
had actually some more cytology slides also, but I was in this much stipulated time. I think this is the best I could give.
yeah, and also the attendees were they are interactive. It was a good session, quite interactive and interesting sessions.
Yeah, they were all
Yeah,
very. I think they were all already read and come kind of students.
exactly. They are prepared, we can say.
Yeah, prepared.
Yeah.
Thank you so
So
much for this opportunity. I really enjoyed doing it, the complete thing, you know, from the scratch, collecting cases to making a PPT to presenting. It was all an enjoyable thing. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Ma'am, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Actually, I'm recently doing a postmortem, so I am having so many lung slides. So I was just confused in this DIP and the one which you showed, this like the hemosiderin laden macrophages. So
Okay.
between the two, the one with the hemosiderin, because there are
So DIP generally you will see a very pink appearance. The smokers macrophages, the particles are very small and they will only be visible on high power. Okay, and initially the name desquamative was kept because of the appearance resembling a squamous cell. Okay, so it should look like a squamous cell to you, pink appearance. Whereas in diffuse alveolar hemosiderosis, it is a brown appearance.
Okay. So they are in the clusters, like classically in the paraseptal areas and the like near the pleura, they are clusters of these cells. So they are
No, it is diffuse alveolar hemosiderosis will be everywhere. And the smoker's lung means RBILD and DIP. So RBILD, if you see respiratory bronchiolitis associated ILD will be around the respiratory bronchioles. And if it is desquamative interstitial pneumonitis, it will be diffuse. It will be almost diffuse.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm having so many cases, so that I was so confused for this. Although it's like two cases, but still I was very interested to diagnose. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so before going to the question and answer, we have a small announcement that we are starting our long course masterization this week. We'll be starting from Friday. And if anyone is interested, you can directly message us.
Yeah, so basically for long course, we'll be having 2 master class for lymphoma, for medical, renal and liver liver. So 2 master classes followed by a mock exam and discussion. And another is the 4th case segment. that will be either in 1 or 2 sessions, and then a final full mock for long. So you can, yeah, so that's will be starting from Friday, and it was good. Like, of course, as you said, lung can again be a scenario in the 4th case of long cases, along with the
Yes.
immunos and all. It can be a very potential thing to be given.
Yeah.
And
Practically in
Yes.
lung, they have given Castleman. So
yeah,
that is a potential area where you can expect a 4th case.
and
Yes.
today itself we were discussing like sclerosing pneumocytoma can of course be a long case, and you have actually put that. So it was yeah. So
It
really,
is, yeah, very less people know about this entity, and it is such a striking entity that people should not, I mean, they have to see whether the pathologist is safe for independent practicing or no. So for that
Yeah.
purpose only they will give, whether you will call it as a benign thing or a malignant thing.
yeah,
And
true.
actually,
And once you
in
know the
one of
entity with the
the
immunos, you will just nail it.
Mm,
But if you are
no,
unaware,
it
you will
can
be
be
stuck.
quite perplexing. So actually, in our expert series, one case was discussed. The simultaneously patient had a PTC, that is your
Yeah.
papillary thyroid carcinoma, and incidental lung nodule. So
Oh,
obviously they did a PTF1. So once that coming,
Yeah.
and there was some nuclear simulation of that grooving and nuclear clearing at the histomorphology. So it was quite challenging.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it was a
Especially
case by
dual
Dr.
pathologies are
Parameter.
challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. And
So
in a
yes,
context of previous malignancy and suspected mates in lung, this pneumocytoma was there. It was a case
Yes,
by Dr.
yes.
Paramita Roy, like from Tata Medical Center, Kolkata.
Okay.
So I think there is only one question. Mostly they have responded to your discussion. So only one question was there from Dr. Nandini Singh. She wanted to know what type of biopsy is usually given for amyloidosis. Do they give wedge biopsy or core needle biopsy for amyloidosis?
So if it's a localized amyloidosis like you have in tracheobronchial amyloidosis, you will get an endobronchial biopsy or a transbronchial biopsy. Okay, because it is bronchus. They will want to sample the bronchus. They will not simply, go through, make the patient go through such an invasive procedure of a wedge. Wedge will be done only when you have something in the lung, like some lung opacities are there, some ground glass opacities, or some interstitial markings are there. So, in cases of septal amyloidosis, particularly, which is a great mimicker of interstitial lung diseases, you can get a wedge. Does that answer the question?
Okay. And one practical query from my side. Actually, frequently I get a lung code, and clinician they suspect lung shadow, ill-defined lung shadow kind of thing. So obviously there is a myofibroblastic proliferation, there is inflammatory cell infiltrate. So what is your approach just to exclude a possibility of IMT? You know that sometimes it can be ALK negative, so that is a challenging things.
Inflammatory myofibroblastic tumors are most of the time ALK negative. So you have to go by radiology first.
Mm-hmm.
So radiologically, if it is a mass forming lesion. Number
Mm.
two, if you are seeing some myofibroblastic cells with good number of plasma cells and encasing or destroying the adjacent alveolar parenchyma. Okay, that means it's a locally kind of advancing, it has a locally advancing, edge.
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to give a differential of inflammatory myofibroblastic tumor.
Yeah,
But
in core biopsy it is
on
difficult.
core biopsies, it is
It's
very
very
difficult. You
difficult,
can
very
just give
difficult.
it as a fibroinflammatory process,
Yeah.
and IMFT is considered as a differential.
Mm.
On IHC, I think Dr. Saha will left exclude everything, including PTG4 related disease if they are plasma cells. Everything that is spindle needs to be excluded before calling it IMT.
Yeah,
It's a
because
diagnosis which will, because
yeah.
you'll have very reactive kind of plasma cells with fibrosis. They're destroying the architecture, but then when you're looking at the core, you might not see that exactly. And then
Yeah.
so then you'll
And in
have to
fact,
put.
on the
There are
and
certain
in fact
studies
on the
that
core,
say that
sorry.
ROS1 can also be done instead if ALK is not there. Very few cases which have been reported in literature, but but we've seen a few of them. It's a difficult diagnosis, a lot of IHC with the
Difficult.
excluded. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the input. And yes, so
And I would
thank
like to add here that
Hmm.
core-needle biopsies, in fact, interstitial lung diseases also should not be reported on core-needle biopsies because they are sometimes very heterogeneous. You in the same wedge resection, you can have an NSIP pattern, UIB pattern, all going hand in hand. So it really depends on where your core needle has gone through, which area it has
Exactly.
gone through. Okay, so wedge resection or VATS guided biopsy or cryobiopsy is the ideal to go for an interstitial lung disease diagnosis.
I agree. Totally agree. Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. So thank you, Dr. Tripti, and it was a wonderful discussion and thorough. All the entities which we discussed. I think no entity has been left for the non-neoplastic thing.
And Dr. Saha, call out for calling her back for some other lecture. She's really good.
Yeah, if she agrees,
Thank you.
we can arrange in the future session also. We'll be glad to have more sessions from her.
Thank you so much.
Maybe we can have a repetition of the same just before the exam so that we can freshen up our knowledge.
Yeah, sure. We can do that if Dr. Saha agrees. And actually, I wanted to show a lot of gross images and frozen sections also, but there was no time. Sorry.
Yeah, I was actually cutting down. We can be falling short of the time and all that. So yeah, so whatever maybe we can plan ahead and we can have a next session.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Good night, and thank you everyone for engaging.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and special thanks to Dr. Fauzia. She referred me to Dr. Tripti so that the connection made. I am grateful for
All
that.
the best to all the attendees.
Yes.
And yeah, just be determined and you will make it through.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.